Right, today we're going to be covering one of the most highly requested cases that we have had come in from you guys, and that is the tragic tale of Leah Croucher. Because after 19-year-old Leah went missing on her way to work one day, many started to ask the question, how can a woman just vanish into thin air? Where were the clues, with CCTV and digital footprint yielding nothing? And then eventually, after holding out hope that she was still alive and declaring that even if she wasn't, they loved her too much to stop looking for answers, Leah's family are hit with the news that they dreaded. Over 3.5 years later, and less than half a mile away, Leah's remains are found. And a chain of events was sparked that would put police competence into huge question. Because much like you may do right now, the public demanded answers. How can a girl's remains sit in a property that people had visited yet no one had ever found? How could that property have been knocked at multiple times by police without answer, yet still not be deemed significant? How can a criminal that's wanted by police escape capture on 18 separate occasions, only to never eventually once be caught by the police? And I believe that a genuine question that could do with looking into is, did the man that the police named actually do the crime? Well, if you stick around to the end, we are going to be delving into the theory that someone way closer to Leah may have been a better fit for the suspect than the man that police identified in committing the crime. This is the tragic case of Leah Croucher.
Before we get into today's episode, we just want to give a warning that this case involves themes of violence, of self-deletion, and the devastating impact that Leah's disappearance had on her friends and family. Before we get into the episode, we just want to send our thoughts and prayers to them, because this was a horrendous moment in their lives. And as always, we will be discussing information on this case that is publicly available, using police findings, using court transcripts, and as much information as we are able to piece from the internet to be able to understand what exactly happened to poor Leah Croucher. Thank you, as always, for watching, Joey and Josh. And now let me tell you a little bit more about Leah. She was born on the 14th of August 1999 and lived a very normal life, growing up in a place called Emerson Valley, which is a place in Milton Keynes, Buckinghamshire. She was raised by her parents, John and Claire Croucher, and she had an older sister and brother. Jade, her older sister, was 7 years older than Leah, and Hayden was 5 years older. Together, they were a very close family. Now, Leah's dad, John, was a Taekwondo instructor, a martial art instructor, and he got both his son Hayden and his daughter Leah very much into the martial art, and they were so good that they were actually competing at an international level, these kids. So it wasn't like they were just mucking around. They were black belts and they were taking it really seriously, and they were very good at it. And because they were training as a family, it meant that Leah had a very strong bond with her brother Hayden. And he felt very protective of his little sister, as many older brothers would do. And he actually had an affectionate nickname for her, in that it was called Shadow. So effectively, she was following him around and she wanted to be very much part of his life. And therefore, she got this very affectionate nickname. And it wasn't just Hayden that was protective of little Leah. It was actually her mum, Claire, as well. She was so protective of her that she actually walked her to school, even when she was quite an old school child. So they actively really protected this little girl. And remember, as she was the youngest of the family, they were very conscious of her safety and looked after her. And almost every member of that family did so. And outside of Taekwondo, Leah wasn't a particularly sociable young girl. In fact, yes, she had a very good close group of friends, but she wouldn't go out partying. She wasn't a raver. She wasn't known to be a big drinker or anything like that. In fact, she was known as being a bit of a homebody. She wanted to stay at home, enjoy the company of her family. If she did get any friends around, it would be back to hers and to have a bit of a relax. So she was known as a bit of a quiet girl and not a big partier, especially when we get to this part of the story where she's 19 19 years old. And you might expect a 19-year-old at this age to want to go out and enjoy themselves, but Leah wasn't really like that. She was described by her mates as a bright, responsible and compassionate young girl, and her mum said that she was a kind, caring soul who worried about others and did her best to ensure those around her were comfortable and happy. And after school, she went to work at a debt collection agency located on Davy Avenue in the Knoll Hill area of Milton Keynes. And her daily routine was pretty simple, really, wasn't it, Jay? Like, basically, she would wake up early in the morning. She would then walk a couple of miles, about a 40-minute walk to work. And then she would start her day and basically walk back home and, you know, have a quiet evening in, dinner with her family. And that was pretty much the routine.
Yeah, I think anything that drifted away from that routine would be probably seen as unusual because of the fact that, like you described, Leah's social activities outside of work at the time weren't sort of bustling.
And this is where we get to the 15th of February 2019. Leah leaves home at 8 o'clock in the morning. She walks through Quantock Crescent and via Buzzacott Lane and Faraday Drive using the city's Redway network of footpaths. But what she didn't know at this point was that this journey would be unlike any other that she had gone on. Now, before we get into that, I just want to ask you, Joey, have you ever looked into buying a used car before?
I have. I actually just purchased a used car as well as selling one of my own.
Did you? Right. So before you got that new car, what was your biggest fear? Like, what were you most worried about?
I think the biggest fear before anyone gets a new car is, has this car been writ off? Has it been in a crash before? What's the history of it?
And that's where you were telling me that carVertical actually really helps. But why don't you explain to these lovely lot what carVertical actually does?
Yeah, so carVertical basically lets you check a vehicle's history before you buy it. It pulls up information from over 900 databases worldwide.
And it can reveal accident history, mileage record, ownership changes, theft records, and loads of other information that could save you from making a very expensive mistake. And we've got a perfect example because a car that we've always loved, and let's be honest, always wanted, Joey, is an Audi R8. At first glance, the one on screen right now looks like it's an absolute gem. It's a manual, it's got a V8 engine, and it looks exactly the sort of dream car that we would both love to get. But when you run the report through carVertical, a very different story starts to emerge. Because straight away you can see that there are damage records associated with the vehicle. And you'll see by the photos that there's actually been a significant front end damage. The report even shows that the car was written off with structural damage in 2018. And we can also see the mileage history over time, ownership changes, whether the car has been MOT'd, and other alerts to prove what the car has actually been through. Now, all of this doesn't necessarily mean that this car is a bad one today, but it definitely gives you more information before you make that car purchase. And that's why carVertical is so useful. It gives you the understanding of what's going on with your car and gives you the negotiation power when you're talking to the used car salesman to actually make the best decision and the best deal for you. And if you run a report and there's no historical data available, you get credits back into your account and effectively it will cost you nothing. So if you're looking at buying a used car, don't just check one vehicle, go through as many as you can and get the best one for you. And if you use code JJ20, you'll get 20% off your carVertical reports. And if you're checking multiple cars, you can get up to 50% off when you use carVertical's bundles. Hit the link in the description before you check out a used car. Thank you so much to carVertical for sponsoring this episode. Now let's get back into it.
Yeah, definitely so. But before we get into that, let's skip forward to 9 a.m. because that is when colleagues and staff at the same firm as Leah realised that she hasn't showed up for work. And that's something that is very far out of line with her character and with her punctuality at that time. And therefore, they do have slight concerns. However, it is worth noting that Leah is an adult in the eyes of the law at this time. She's 19 years old. She's a staff member that already takes on responsibility and things like that, and therefore could maybe be perceived as being old for her years. wise for her years, definitely. And therefore, the alarm bells weren't ringing at her firm, so to speak. Where they were ringing and definitely did start ringing was around the 6 o'clock mark, when Leah would usually be getting home from work. You've mentioned that walk home from work. So being in mind that it would take 40 to 45 minutes, something like that. Once it got to 6 o'clock, her family became concerned. Once it got to 6:30, her family became worried, panicked, frantic, so much so that they actually ring up her work. They find out that she didn't go that day and she didn't turn up, and therefore they immediately dial in a phone call to the police.
It's always interesting with these cases about how quickly the families do call the police, because again, a 19-year-old potentially skipping out on a day of work, going out with her mates, enjoying themselves, potentially that could have been an outcome of this case. And a lot of parents wouldn't actually have called the police at this point, but they were worried enough that they did it straight away, which I think really is a testament to how well the parents knew Leah and what she was actually doing, right?
I think that holds a mirror up on two things in life. The first thing is that old adage of always trust your gut. If your gut instinct is telling you that something is massively out of the ordinary to the point where services need informing ASAP, then I think you're within your right to trust that gut instinct. The other thing that it might do is shine a light on some of the context surrounding Leah's personal life that the family knew at the time, and maybe that we would go on to find out about later. And it's something that the police had already been looking into at the time of Leah's disappearance. Before they were actually able to go public and announce her as a missing person, due to the fact that she was of adult age, certain protocols had to be done. They had to be able to check the CCTV, contact friends, other family members, colleagues maybe of hers, and also they had to track her digital footprint. But this is when the history books start to benefit the police's investigation, and that's because of the fact that, unlike many cases in the past that we've covered, it's 2019 now. People have iPhones, people have Ring doorbells, CCTV's advanced, and it's everywhere, and sometimes it's being operated by AI intelligence and stuff, and therefore there's a very good chance we're going to be able to find out exactly where Leah was, at least when her phone was switched off. But once again, upon going down this avenue, the police find something more concerning, something once again that starts to shape their focus. And this is the fact that the evening before, someone that many people believe to be Leah had disabled her phone's location services. And this was something that eventually Leah's network provider was able to confirm had never been done during her time with that phone. So it's either one of two things. It's a mistake, or it's a massively out of character coincidence that starts to paint a picture of what could have been going on here. And the fact that she had disabled those services meant that instead of the police being able to basically get her coordinates and precise location, they could only actually pick her up on the cell tower ping. Now, anyone that's watched our videos before would have had a little bit of an insight into cell tower pings, but this is somewhat of a last chance saloon for being able to track people, or maybe the first place that you would go to 25 years ago, before smartphones. Basically, the cell towers will often transmit a ping on our phone, and it did this for Leah. The problem was it didn't narrow down the area all that much. It showed that Leah was likely near the Furton Lake area of Milton Keynes. However, just in that immediate area where her cell phone pinged, there was over 1,000 residential homes. So the police appeal. They say they're growing increasingly concerned as to Leah's whereabouts and her welfare, and they're encouraging either herself or members of the public to come forwards. And they do. People ring in and say they saw Leah on Buzzercoat Lane, which CCTV is able to confirm, but then the CCTV loses her. Now, about 5 minutes away from where she was seen walking on the CCTV and in line with the direction that she would have likely been walking is Furton same lake. 3 separate witnesses all call up in the aftermath to report a young girl that they believed could have been Leah, who looked distressed, looked alarmed, and looked like she could have been having a conversation or an argument, very possibly on her mobile phone by that lake. And 2 of those witnesses report seeing that same girl again afterwards in a way calmer state. None of those reports were ever confirmed to have been Leah. So now police need to exhaust every avenue they possibly can, which starts with a good bit of old-fashioned door knocking. Do you know how many doors, Josh, they actually knocked on in total?
Was it over 1,000?
It was over 4,000 homes. Yeah. They knocked on the doors at, as I say, in the immediate vicinity of that tower where her phone last pinged, there was over 1,000 residential homes. But all the way from February until October of that year, when Leah had gone missing, there was pretty much nothing in terms of leads, in terms of lines of inquiry to chase. But that would all change after her case is actually featured on BBC's Crime Watch, which was still going at the time. And like always with cases that are featured on Crime Watch, it leads to an influx of calls with potential information. One of these specific calls states that they saw a grey hoodie floating in that same lake where many people believe that Leah may well have been. And the reason why this held a lot of relevance was because Leah was actually being said to have been wearing her grey taekwondo hoodie on the journey when she went missing. And this meant that the Blue Lagoon Nature Reserve in Bletchley was completely drained and searched. But after doing so, the police once again found nothing. And this would have been a hammer blow to the family of Leah's, a family that were stuck in time, were stuck in limbo, weren't able to move on with their life, or weren't able to potentially start that grieving process because of the fact that they did have no idea. One thing they did know for sure is that people were setting up fake social media accounts pretending to be Leah. They were messaging some of the family members, including Leah's brother Hayden, who was obviously really tragically struggling to come to terms with this. And you can imagine just how infuriating that would be when you're seeing your mum and dad cry day in, day out, your siblings and whatnot. You're missing the person closest to you, and you've got what I think strongly assume are children, kids, teenagers or whatever on social media making up fake accounts, pretending to be that missing person. It's hard to get your head around.
It's absolute disgrace. But again, unfortunately, this happens in so many cases. And it's not just a problem with this one in particular, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it's just ridiculous. And the fact that this is allowed, I mean, ultimately, this should be a crime in itself. And I hope the police actually do go and investigate these people and start shutting them down, because, I mean, we've talked about this over and over again. If this isn't a reason to get some form of identification to be on social media, then I don't know what is.
Well, there was a arrest made. There was a caution handed out. The police actually found out that a man, not a child, a man had been doing this. He had been saying, I'm Leah, I'm pregnant, I've run away to do this, this and that. They eventually bring him in and caution him. Naming and shaming him is not something they did and is something that I would have done personally. And I feel like the hindsight is maybe one of the reasons that I say that, because as I say, this time was turmoil, to be honest, for Leah's brother Hayden. And it actually resulted initially in Hayden himself getting into some trouble with the police, with the court system. He was handed a restraining order. And this was because Leah's brother Hayden actively started to pursue someone he believed was the prime suspect in his sister's disappearance. Because it was alleged that Hayden's mental health started deteriorating rapidly after he came to a conclusion in his mind that Leah's disappearance involved a mystery affair of hers. The problem was Hayden knew exactly who the man was in this mystery affair, and it turned out that this man actually had to be called and stated to as Mr. X in court due to fears over his identity being revealed and the backlash that could come with that. Hayden is said to have said to Mr. X, listen, you spill the beans, otherwise I will, online. And it's actually off the back of that Mr. X is able to get a restraining order on Hayden. In October, Hayden attends a therapy session, and bearing in mind that therapy in itself is already pretty heavy, it might shock some of you to find out just how concerned that therapist was for Hayden's welfare after he had told them that he was finding it very, very hard to go on without his sister. And on the 13th of November, the day before the 9-month anniversary of Leah's disappearance, he's checked into an NHS mental health facility. And in yet another heartbreaking twist, he's turned away because they have no beds to be able to facilitate him. And the next day, Hayden Croucher took his own life, with his poor parents finding his body. In the space of 9 months, they had lost a daughter and now a son who wouldn't be coming back. Just months later, on the first anniversary of Leah's disappearance, her heartbroken father, John, once again appeals for information that could lead to his daughter being found or to finding out answers of what happened. And John has turned somewhat aggressive in this appeal by this point, rightly so, in my opinion, because John feels that the way that the police are handling this case isn't the way that it should be handled. It is very fair to say at this point, Josh, that the family believe, in my opinion, that Mr. X from work, the apparent affair, is the route that is going to provide them with the most answers, isn't it?
Yeah, so we've got to go back to the night before Leah goes missing. Now, what we know for certain is that she got back home from work, she very quickly got changed, and then she went out for about an hour and 15 minutes. And she'd said to her family that she was going out to meet a friend, and she didn't really elucidate anything more than that, right? She just said she was going out. And so the family let her go and do her own thing. She isn't out for that long, we would say, like an hour and 15 minutes. Pops out, you know, at this time of the year, she's popping out, she's back before it even gets anywhere near dark, right? So that was obviously on the eve of Valentine's Day. And so you could understand that this meetup might not have just been a platonic one between friends. It might have been a very romantic meetup. And so we are then at this point trying to understand who that was. And really, we know who it was, don't we? It was this Mr. X that we keep hearing about.
I mean, there's nothing to conclude that it was definitely Mr. X, but I would very much lean in that direction. It was either Valentine's Day or the eve of Valentine's Day. These two were said to be in a relationship together. If there was absolutely no honesty in it, I think that we would have had that as concrete evidence, and therefore maybe the harassment order wouldn't have been put out. Maybe the sequence of events that led to that would have never happened. In my mind, I would say that Leah's family are probably right with their beliefs to believe that there was actively a romantic relationship going on between Leah and Mr. X at this time.
And the reason why we know that is because he was a co-worker of Leah's. Now, Leah's mum actually knew about this relationship because Leah wouldn't stop going on about him. Basically, they would have conversations all the time, and she was saying how smitten she was with him and that they would often go and see each other. And her mum knew about this. So it wasn't like a thing where Leah was keeping this from the family.
And that's funny that you say that she wasn't keeping it from the family, Josh, because as much as I would agree with you in terms of the presence of a potential Mr. X being known by the family, I don't think that they did know just how serious this relationship may have been. One of the key reasons I say that is because Leah's family have always said that the common denominator in this case has been Leah lying. And that's something that she had never done apart from when they believe she was meeting Mr. X. A meeting that they, along with many people, believe happened the night before Leah went missing, and also a meeting that some people believe happened a couple of weeks before Leah went missing. And that was when she was said to be staying at a hotel with a couple of her friends. This was somewhat of a celebration, and it was actually an event that her dad dropped her to, dropping her out the front of this hotel. However, It's said after that Leah didn't stay at that hotel with friends, at least the friends that she had said were staying with her that night. And that meant that it led the family to believe that Leah likely stayed with Mr. X in the hotel that evening. But when the police looked into it, the hotel CCTV had been wiped.
So let me tell you a bit more about Mr. X. And as we've said, he was a co-worker, but he wasn't the same age as Leah. In fact, he was 8 years older than her. And it gets a little bit worse as well. He was actually married at the time that they met and the time that they continued their relationship. So if there was anything more than just, platonic, just being friends, then obviously there was some adultery involved in this as well.
Which would mean that Mr. X could potentially have a lot to lose in a hypothetical scenario where Leah threatened to out him or something like that.
And it was so serious, the connection of this romantic involvement and the evidence to say that she may have met up with him the night before, that the police took this incredibly seriously. And they brought Mr. X in for questioning several times. So it wasn't just a case of, a quick chat with him, an alibi is found and he's immediately released. They actually interrogated him quite a few times and they didn't immediately get the answers that they wanted. But what I will say is that the police did eventually discount Mr. X from their lines of inquiry. They felt that he did have an alibi that was, sufficient enough to rule him out of the investigation. And therefore he was very quickly after that never really implicated again.
And there are certain questions that I really, really hope that the family of Leah have the answers to. And one of those questions would be, were Mr. X's digital devices seized? Were they looked into? Because I understand that the be-all and end-all is that Mr. X had an alibi, didn't he? Mm-hmm. He had somewhere where he allegedly was at this time. And that is what we as the public are led to believe from the findings.
But we don't know that, by the way. We've never been told what the alibi was.
We've never been told what the alibi was. And therefore, we don't know whether that is the alibi of someone who has no evidence, but is just saying, yep, Mr. X was with me on that day. We don't know whether it's the fact that Mr. X potentially turned up on time for work that day. We don't know whether he was on holiday or sick leave. We don't know anything about that day. So I would love to know if this alibi is Mr. X caught on CCTV somewhere else. Have you expanded all avenues? Have you looked into any possibility that he could have had involvement without him being the one to physically be at the scene? It's a question that if I was a member of the Croucher family, I would want an answer to. On the second anniversary of Leah's disappearance, there's another presser where police admit that they are both baffled and confused at the lack of leads. Josh, I already said to you that they had knocked on over 4,000 homes. Do you know how many of those homes they had actually thoroughly searched?
Is it less than 500?
It is less than 500. It was 400 of those homes. They also said that they had chased leads to conclusion of up to 600 sightings of Leah. The reward money starts off at around £5,000. Then a wealthy local businessman or something like that, we're at least led to believe, actually comes in and wants to up the reward money, which eventually happens. But it doesn't happen without a bit of pushback, because this wealthy businessman actually eventually ends up going to the papers and saying, I have been actively trying to contribute towards the reward fund and to be able to actually double that reward fund. And I've just been getting put on hold by the police. They're showing no interest. This is a final resort. And it really makes you beg the question, why? And about 8 months later, a tip-off changes everything. A handyman that's been working locally in the area goes to the police and he says that an address that he has just carried out work on has a foul-smelling stench coming from it. And more concerningly, there was a bag left in the loft of that address. The address that the police had previously knocked at twice, but received no answer. An address that many believe the homeowner doesn't actually live at. And an address that is said to have been visited in this period by estate agents and by multiple other handymen, but didn't really become deemed as significant in the inquiry. And if you take yourself back to the start of the episode, then you guys may remember hearing the location and therefore may have realized that this address is right by where Leah was last supposed to have been. And on Monday, the 10th of October, the police arrive at the house. They find Leah's backpack with her possessions inside, and eventually, in the attic, they find a bag of human remains. 2 days later, they announce their findings to the public. They launch an investigation, and very, very quickly, a clear suspect emerges.
That suspect was a man called Neil Maxwell. But who was Neil Maxwell? He was born on the 9th of February 1970 in a small place in Hertfordshire called Bushey, but not much is really known about his childhood. And Maxwell went on to basically go and work as a handyman, and a lot of his work was cash in hand, so he very much went under the radar. And he was the person that was employed to keep an eye on this property in Milton Keynes, the property in which the owner was very much out of the country and spent a lot of his time abroad. And of course, Maxwell was the only person with keys to that property that was in the United Kingdom at the time, which led to a lot of suspicion upon him. Now, what's absolutely clear is that Maxwell is a truly horrendous human being, and he had a track record of several years of committing the most awful crimes imaginable. In 1998, he assaulted a child receiving a 12-month custodial sentence and was subsequently placed on the sex offenders register. Then in 2002, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison for 3 separate sexual assault offences against a young girl. In 2009, he pled guilty again to assaulting a woman, this time in Datchet, Berkshire, resulting in a prison sentence of 4 more years and 10 months. And then in 2018, he assaulted another woman, this time in Milton Keynes. For this crime, he was only given 200 hours of community service and received no custodial sentence. And there were several other allegations against him that never went to court. So why this man was ever allowed on the streets in the first place absolutely terrifies me. And the thought that there are other people out there right now that are just walking around is absolutely scary, is it not?
There's a lot of them.
And it wasn't just the courts that knew about Maxwell. Indeed, many people that were close to him also knew about the reputation of this awful human being. An ex-girlfriend stated that he had groomed and then dated her while she was underage, forcing her into acts and harboring a sick obsession with underage girls. She described his character as deeply sinister, and she said that he had an addiction to young girls and basically pinning them down and assaulting them. And as a convicted sex offender, he was subject to a multi-agency public protection agreement, a framework where police, the probation officers, and the prison services work together to assess and manage the risks posed by dangerous offenders. And within this matrix, he was given a high probability of re-offending. And even with that, he was still allowed to walk free after his custodial sentences. So if he had this record and was in the general area of Milton Keynes in 2019, then why didn't police immediately target this man as a potential suspect? Well, in the months leading up to Leah Croucher's disappearance, in February 2019, Neil Maxwell was actively on the run from law enforcement and completely evading his legal supervision requirements. He actually failed to attend several probation hearings in and around the 2018-2019 timeline, which meant by January 2019, he was actively being chased down by the police for breaching those probation guidelines, and he was very much being hunted down.
He was very much able to escape capture at that time, though. And it does make me ask a question, mate. For someone that's on the run and being hunted by the police, and we will get into this in a bit more depth, would an abduction in broad daylight be the smartest thing to do?
Well, it wouldn't be the smartest thing to do, but I wouldn't have said this man was the smartest tool in the shed, if I'm being completely honest with you. And I also think what's clear from all of the testimony, the court documents, the other people that knew him, the former partner, they said that he had an addiction. In fact, a lot of people that had worked with him previously, that had given him jobs, even though he was under probation and on the sex offenders register, said that what was clear is that he had these predilections and he had an addiction and he couldn't stop it. So I think he was completely addicted to this form of crime.
And therefore, you would put this down, if Maxwell was the man that did it, which is what the police say, as an opportunistic crime, I would imagine. You would assume that Maxwell was sat inside the house that he had keys for. Maybe perhaps he was already working on it that day, and he abducted Leah, who is a black belt in Taekwondo, in broad daylight without any sign of a struggle. Signs that would have been visible for the fact that actually there was snow on the ground in terms of, drag marks and things like that. So opportunistic abduction in broad daylight by Neil Maxwell.
That is I suppose, the official events that people say, the police and the investigators say. And I would say, based on all of the evidence that I've seen, that is the most likely outcome of this case.
Do you find it a little bit strange that not only were there no eyewitness reports of Neil Maxwell being in the area or being at that address on the day, do you know during the whole time that Leah was said to have been missing, from the day that she went until the day that Maxwell himself was found, there's also no evidence to suggest that he was in Milton Keynes?
Well, again, this is the thing. He was very good at evading the police. They tried to arrest him 18 times in the period between he was, sought out for the probation breaches in November 2018, all the way to January 19, when they were actually trying to find him, and beyond that point, right? So he had changed his name. He had gotten rid of all of his phone and cellular data, basically. He'd thrown as much as he possibly could away. He even changed his appearance. He'd lost a dramatic amount of weight, grew a beard. He tried to do everything he possibly could to, one, avoid police, and two, avoid going back to prison, because he very much wanted to be out free and on the streets. So much so that he actually committed another assault in November 2018 that they were actually again trying to find him for. So to say that, for your point here, to say, how did no one know? How was there no other evidence? I would counter that by saying there was a lot of other assaults that were never actually sent to court. They were never actually trialed. There was not enough evidence. There were not enough allegations against him to actually say and prove that it was him. So I think, being completely honest with you, he was very good at this. He was very good at abducting people. He was very good at targeting young women and forcing himself upon them. And therefore, he would have the ability to do what he did to Leah.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm just raising the questions that many of our viewers have, and many people, when I've found debate upon this topic of conversation, because when there is no DNA of the perpetrator at the crime scene, regardless of, DNA connecting them to the murder, just DNA at the crime scene that they were apparently the only person that had the access for this house at, there are going to be questions asked. If it's confirmed that there are ring doorbells on houses, for example, on the other side of the road or on the same side of the road at that time, which in 2019 there were, yet no one has anything to link Maxwell to it, questions do start to be asked. And then when you come onto it, and the owner of this property, we don't know whereabouts this person is from, but we are led to believe that maybe this owner could live in Kuwait. Am I right to assume?
You told me that I actually didn't know anything about the homeowner at all.
Oh, okay,
I don't know.
So online it says that the homeowner lives in Kuwait. He may well not do, he may do. But what we do know for a fact, going off what the police have given us, is that this property was vacant, and it was pretty much only a couple of handymen and a few others that were able to access the property. But there have been allegations that many people went into this property at various different times, including estate agents, where the property was either being looked at for sale or for rent or something like that. There were also other handymen who said that they did work on this property. And until that date, no one ever recorded a foul smell coming from the property, which does baffle me a little bit, if I'm honest with you, mate.
It does, but everything you've said there could be absolutely true, by the way. But from what I've heard from the court, he was the only one that had keys to the property, Maxwell, at the time, until his passing. From that point of view, it's difficult to say whether it was anyone else or whether that is the case, that there are other people involved. All I know is that in 2019, that event occurred, but it wasn't until 2022 when a new handyman was in the property that the foul odour was identified. That handyman then reported that foul odour to the police, and that is then when, unfortunately, Leah's remains were found. And it wasn't just her remains that were found, it was all of her belongings, the very distinctive rucksack and jumper that we've talked about. They were all found in the loft of that property, which meant that police, for the first time in several years, had a real lead to go on in terms of the potential suspects. And the primary suspect that they immediately landed on was Neil Maxwell. And I just want to say at this point that our thoughts and prayers very much go out to Leah's family. Obviously, they've already lost Hayden, and now they had the final information about the whereabouts of Leah, and they knew at this point that they'd lost her as well. And you can imagine just how truly awful this was. I mean, we've seen footage and press conferences of them. We've seen how devastated they were even before knowing what had actually happened to Leah.
Well, the pain of it being on your doorstep, that's the thing that would be so heartbreaking. After all of this time, she was a stone's throw away, basically. Do you know what I mean? And the amount of effort that was put in by the family in those years to then go and find out that she was so close to home would have been a huge, huge kick in the teeth. And I do have to say, Josh, that unlike some of the cases I've looked into, I can't really find a definitive stance from the family. Listen, acceptance and that actually being your stance are two very, very different things. We understand that in Britain today, definitely under Starmer's what was government, families of victims are treated, in my opinion, quite appallingly in terms of the information that they're allowed to say, the information that they're able to put out, and a lot of this information that they're told not to say and requested not to speak about will be things that, in my opinion, could have potentially helped cases in the early stages, could have helped stop certain lines of inquiry and focus attention on other lines of inquiry. Now, her family, Leah's family, her parents have said that the police actively told them to not mention Mr. X.
So wait a second, do you actually suspect Mr. X is being involved in this crime? Because the police don't.
I think that there's certain bits of information that the police may be able to give me that would dissolve any bit of suspicion I had on this man immediately. But without those bits of information, I've got to go off the information that I have available, right? Right now, I don't know about this alibi or where he was or whatever. We're just taking the police at their word. The police in this country have been known to be liars on multiple occasions before. So I'm going to use my own brain and I'm going to go, right, okay. Was Leah in a romantic relationship, at least in her own head, with Mr. X? Yes. Did this happen very close to a day that is historically a romantic calendar day, and with what comes with that could have been a day in which Leah could have potentially said to Mr. X, look, I want some clarity on our situation. Are you going to leave me? Are you going to stay with your family? Whatever. Well, I don't know. But potentially, could that have been an avenue? Yes. Does Mr. X have knowledge of Leah's potential route that she could have been working to or from work? Yeah. And does Mr. X give me the most sort of definitive clarity on a potential answer for my question as to why were those location services disabled the night before? He does, yes. I do believe that the most likely option, bearing in mind that Leah's friend that she was said to have been meeting that night was cross-referenced, examined. She wasn't meeting Leah. She never met Leah. She never had no plans to meet Leah. And anyone else that was involved with Leah had the opportunity to come forward and say, I met up with Leah last night. Yeah? Do you think Leah met someone the evening before? Do you think she went out for a walk on her own?
I know for certain that she did meet someone. Right. Sure of that.
Okay. So then you know for certain that someone has not come forward to say that I met Leah that night. I don't believe that man was Neil Maxwell. So if Neil Maxwell did the murder, that's fine. Yeah. I'm not suggesting it was anyone else. I don't believe that Neil Maxwell was known to Leah. I don't believe he knew Leah, and I don't believe that Leah knew him. I don't believe that Neil Maxwell was the man that Leah went to meet the evening before. No. And therefore, if you say to me, the evidence for Leah Maxwell doing it is that he had the keys to this property, and we will just take that at face value from this potentially Kuwaiti living owner of the property without, letting the public know of our evidence on that, then obviously it weakens that for me. At the moment, there's just as much to suggest that it could have been someone else for me as there is to Neil Maxwell. But listen, I understand that some people won't like my view on that. This is one, I half don't want to say it because I don't want to offend anyone. I don't want to, uncover old wounds and things like that. But gut instinct, I don't potentially believe that Neil Maxwell did this.
So this is the thing. And the only caveat to what I think you've just said there is that we have no evidence to say that Mr. X was the person that she met the night before. Now, police may have that, Joey, but in the research that I could tell, that was never refuted in court. It was never actually said who the person was that she met the night before. And I don't think they were able to prove that because of the location services being disabled, which might have been the purpose of disabling them in the first place. So
if Leah had met anyone that evening before that was anything but innocent, that person would have came forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. So the fact of the matter is that we can't use any publicly available information to connect Mr. X with the crime at present, but there is circumstantial evidence to say that he could have been. So that's why you're raising it now, right? Yep. That's why we're even talking about this now, because I feel like if there was irrefutable evidence that he wasn't connected with it, now the police may have that, but we don't, then we could very easily say, okay, well, he's not implicated in the crime at all. Because in all of these cases that we cover, if there are other suspects that are innocent, it's very easy to prove their innocence, is it not?
That information that the police may or may not have, right? There's no right for us to have that information. No. But would you agree that there's definitely a right for the Crouchers to have that information?
100%.
And do you believe they have that information?
Well, I don't
If you go on the wording and if you go on the way they've spoken, the aggression of the tone and stuff like that, do you believe that the Crouchers are satisfied?
Can I give you, before we do that, the official circumstances and the official events of what the police and the investigators have said about this crime?
Yeah, you summarise for me what the police believe happened.
So investigators believe that as Leah walked past 2 Lockspear Drive in Furstown, which was on her way to work, Maxwell attacked Leah. And based on the police and inquest findings, Leah was then forced into the property at 2 Lockspear Drive and was murdered by Maxwell on the day that she disappeared or very shortly thereafter. And in fact, Detective Superintendent Kevin Brown of Thames Valley Police testified at the inquest that he believed that Leah was the victim of an unwanted sexual attack. He believed that because she was that black belt in Taekwondo, that she may have used her martial arts training to fight back against Maxwell. And DCI Brown stated that I believe she would have defended herself and that may have escalated the situation, ultimately leading to her death. And following the murder, Maxwell took steps to dismember Leah's body, placing her remains inside of those plastic bags and concealing them in the loft of the house. Now, you might be asking what happened to Neil Maxwell. Surely he was sent down to trial and faced the court for his actions. Well, the fact of the matter is that Neil Maxwell never made it to court because on April the 20th, 2019, just 2 months after Leah's disappearance, Maxwell's body was found in a bike shed in Milton Keynes. He had self-deleted just 2 miles away from where Leah had disappeared. The coroner later formally identified him as Neil Maxwell and determined that the death was a self-deletion. And while there wasn't a trial against him, there was an inquest about the circumstances around Leah's death. And that was concluded in June 2024, wasn't it, Joey?
Yeah, well, that inquest into the case actually concluded that the cause of death could never be revealed because of the amount of decay that the body had gone under. And therefore, the Taekwondo theory about fighting back and things like that, it's nothing.
Never substantiated. It's very difficult to do it, yeah.
No.
Yeah, but that's just what the police said. Yeah.
Well, it is what the police say, but for something that makes quite a big part in the case and in the theories and whatever, I find it weird that we're just basing that and bringing that on from something that was never substantiated, was never proven. The inquest did conclude that Maxwell could and should have been stopped. He was a known predator that was living in the area apparently and violating the terms of his condition. Now, Josh, if you were a known predator living in the area and the police had 18 attempts at arresting you, do you think you could lose a bit of weight and grow your beard a little bit and you'd be completely fine? No. So after one attempt, maybe two attempts, after about 3 attempts, would you say that maybe, just maybe, we could point the finger at a little bit of police incompetence here?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, he had 18 attempts to actually arrest him, and the fact that he wasn't arrested.
But he grew his beard. He grew his beard, though.
Yeah. But it's
lost weight, gained weight.
It's a joke.
Come on. Yeah. Probably didn't say his name was Neil Maxwell.
And this is the thing, I don't know if you know this, but there was a lot of press around this case where people were going, well, we spent so much money. We've dredged every lake that we could possibly do. In fact, we got rid of all of the water in one of the lakes so we could really do a thorough search. You know, we've done billboards. They used 3D reconstruction of Leah's face on billboards and sort of like social media posts to be able to actually identify her and, you know, trying to find information about her disappearance. So the police made a concerted effort to say, we're really trying here. And not only are we really trying, we're spending a lot of money to actually be able to try and find her. But the fact of the matter is that they didn't really do the basic stuff that they probably should have done, which again comes back to the fact of they didn't actually search that house when they knew that it was right there. They put a leaflet through the door of what could have been a very substantial and very important element to the case. And again, this is the thing, like it's often the people and the locations that are right in front of you that end up being the most important for these cases. And again, the police just didn't do the very basic stuff. So find the person that owns that house, demand that house is searched immediately, and perhaps, you know, there could have been a different outcome to this case.
And do you believe the police when they say that they went to that hotel and the CCTV had already been written over?
Well, you never know, do you? You never know. But it seems strange.
It seems strange. It seems convenient. You know, obviously the services on her mobile were turned off by Leah herself, but Leah can't be at fault for overwriting the CCTV. She also can't be at fault for disappearing off CCTV herself that morning. That's something that the police aren't really able to tell us how or why or when or where, but she did disappear off that CCTV herself. I think there's so much in this case to leave me with more questions than answers that it is one of those cases that's going to play on my mind for a long, long time afterwards.
Yeah, and this is the thing, like with this case, I think a lot of people would say that this is a solved case.
I really don't believe it. I'm sorry.
And this is the thing, like a lot of people say, we found the person. Unfortunately, they're no longer with us, so they didn't actually be able to face the ramifications of the court, which they
unfortunately they never admitted to anyone, as well as the letter that they left with them. They never left any details of Leah herself or admitting to knowing her or anything like that. Obviously, no one was said in the interim to have said, like we always get, even when people just want to do it to sell a newspaper story, oh, he admitted it to me. No one came forward. No junkies, nothing like that came forward to say, oh, he admitted it to me, which you'd think they probably would in that circumstance. And once again, like I said, despite the fact he was found in Milton Keynes, please find me a witness report. Please find me one of the arrests that stated they were in Milton Keynes when they tried to arrest him. Just find me someone saying I sighted him around Milton Keynes at this time. Very, very difficult to, which I think in 2019 is probably out of the ordinary.
So before we say anything more, again, I just want to say Leah's friends and family, my God, they've been through something absolutely awful with this. And again, you know, losing Hayden as well, I just can't imagine where their headspace is at right now. They definitely said they don't forgive anyone in this case, you know, in the ramifications of the inquest after. And I think they harbour still a lot of anger at the way that the events were being conducted. So that I hope that by watching this episode, if they ever do see it, they see that we're just trying to find the truth. And again, we're trying to do the best that we can to actually find out what had happened to poor Leah as well.
I think, unfortunately, there'll be a lot of people that will come away from this episode that probably share a similar sentiment to myself. And if you don't, You're maybe more sitting on the fence or leaning to one side. I would love to know the reasons why in the comment section below. I think cases like this where there is that element of no one's ever really been brought to justice. And the reason I say that is because although a killer has been named, he wasn't brought to justice. He took his own life. Cases like this are the ones when I actually think that the feedback from you guys and seeing what your opinions are and where your heads are at on it are ones that actually help us to shape and form some of our opinions. So I'd really, really like to see whether I am in a sort of disproportionate rate of people, or a minority, I should say, that believe that this case is unsolved.
And again, thank you so much to every single one of you for sticking around and watching another one of these cases. Again, we spoke about it last time in the last episode. We are so proud and so happy that now 50,000 people are subscribed to the Joey and Josh channel. And if you want to be one more subscriber, then this is a wonderful time to do that. Just hit that subscribe button now. You'll get a new true crime episode every single week in your YouTube subscription box. And if you want to get those videos earlier than anyone else, then all you need to do is hit the join button below, or there's also a link in the description. If you do that, you'll get straight through to become a member of the hardcore and get access to our videos 48 hours before anyone else. It only costs the price of a coffee every single month to join, and you'll be supporting the wonderful work that we do here at Joey and Josh. And now, if you want to watch another episode similar to this, then why don't you check out the video on screen right now, which is the Becky Watts case, another case involving family members and a truly horrific crime. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.